Blackout by Hubert Aquin, translated by Alan Brown. This is one of the best books that I have read in a long time. It is a novel within a novel. It's kind of trippy. We literally begin with a narrator, with a writer who admits to heavy drug use, who admits to murder. But then we begin to wonder, is this a true life confession? Is this the fictional work of a writer? Because we have an editor who interjects himself in the text, who interjects through footnotes at the bottom. I'll just show you a page. So throughout the book, there are footnotes. The core editor tries to explain things within the text, explains what he has left in and left out. This core editor assumes this to be a work of fact, to be an account of the life, to be a memoir of this prominent man who has died recently. But then suddenly we get footnotes from someone calling themselves RR. And about halfway through, a little more than halfway through, suddenly we have a passage by this RR who is claiming to be the true author of the work, telling the reader that everything read previously, including the notes and interjections of this previous editor, are fiction, that she invented them all, this is her novel. But then in subsequent passages, we have the original editor interjecting once again, saying, I don't know who RR is, she's spouting lies, and we end up having these two editors battling over the text, trying to control what happens. And for a great deal of it, you're not sure whether this is indeed a true account or whether this is a fictional novel, and you're not sure who the author of this novel is. It's not until finally, in about the last 5 or 10 pages of the book, that everything suddenly becomes clear, and it's magnificent. So Blackout is a French-Canadian work, originally published in the 1960s. It was selected for the Governor General's Award in 1968, but the author refused to accept it. If you want to read this, good luck. It is out of print. I picked it up at a used book sale on the weekend. I paid $2 for it, but a little bit of investigation online led me to realize that it is not available on Amazon unless you want to go the used route. And if you go the used route, it's selling for upwards of $100. I checked out A-Books. There was one edition for about $20, which is the same edition I have. One copy of that. All the other copies available were selling for upwards of $100. So if you feel like reading this, scour your used bookshops, scour the used book websites, and maybe you'll get lucky. Interestingly enough, there's also a lot of politics incorporated into this novel. The main writer of the text, he considers himself a revolutionary. He is a great public speaker. He meets the woman that he murders. He meets this woman, Joan, for the first time after one of his speeches. But he's also a very sadistic man. He deliberately and in great detail plans the murder of his lover, Joan, for no particular rational reason, it seems. And he comes to, although he doesn't say it, he seems to come to regret killing her because it seems as if he was deeply in love with her. And as I read, I was trying to figure out exactly what the author was getting at, because there were a lot of references to separatism, to revolution, to the relationship between Quebec and the rest of the country. And in a couple places I actually wrote notes. I was trying to figure out what Joan represented. I'm still not sure. I'll have to think about that some more, whether she was indeed meant to represent anything. But it was a very good novel, left me with a lot to think about, very trippy, definitely worth reading, quite a wild experience to read because I was kept guessing the entire time. As I said, it wasn't until the last couple of pages that finally all was revealed. I just want to read a passage from here to show you what the writing is like. From 108, it's the first passage that the core editor writes after the editor RR interjects herself into the text. He writes, "I owe the truth to the faithful reader who has read in succession the opening letter signed Gazo Quinum, the raving account by the crypto-revolutionary pharmacist, the passage following that in which the editor himself intervenes in the story, and at last but not least the terminal confession of the supposed RR, who, if she is to be believed, possessed Joan more madly and passionately than any of that dear child's other possible or impossible partners, including Pierre X. Magnant, who is that revolutionary writer, the core writer of the text. RR, as she shows herself in this false testimony, obliges me to refute her with all the violence at my disposal, and let this so-called RR take the consequences. Her immodest tale left me in a state of near shock. That little vixen hanging there on her catwalk, while Joan was busy on the stage, might just as well go in for common blackmail. She is so gifted at writing slanderous filth and describing in detail contortions that are totally imaginary. At first, I admit, I hesitated somewhat. I asked myself certain questions. After all, one is never sure of knowing all about people's love life, even those who live close to us. But little by little, and partly by chance, I discerned a few false notes in the tale of RR's affair with Joan, followed by certain improbabilities that were not too hard to diffuse. Luckily for me, for otherwise I should have stumbled under the impact of shock and surprise, and fallen helpless into the snares and trapdoors of this apocryphal script. There is no longer any doubt in this connection, however. Of that I am certain. When the said RR, pushing her imposture too far, claims as her own the text which Pierre X. Magnant wrote with his own hand, she is either delirious or lying in the most shameless way. One may overlook her expansionist literary ambition, with its plagiarism and dirty tricks, but her contemptuous vanity could easily distort the truth and give rise to serious confusion in the reader's mind. Yet, when we look closely, the difference between her distinctly Miss Edgar school style and that of Pierre X. Magnant, agile, almost ethereal, is strikingly obvious. Who does she think she is? A genius at imitation, a super-gifted periodist? Does she really think she can get by the attentive reader with this crude fakery, which is, in the last analysis, no more than a pitiful attempt to talk over Pierre X. Magnant's confessions, and in the very process his strange affair with Joan? There are limits to imposture, after all, and that of the supposed RR is obvious, and decidedly vulgar. What the devil do I care if this idiot slept with Joan or not? Once or 100 times. Nothing, indeed, is impossible. Can one ever be sure? What I cannot allow is that she take the credit, with utter treachery, for what Pierre X. Magnant, he and no other, wrote. This I find scandalous. The supposed RR, a wretched forger, has no right to enjoy simultaneously the glory of hoary stagecraft and that of having composed the troubled autobiography of Pierre X. Magnant. It occurred to me as well that her vagomotor wanderings on the subject of Hans Hoblin's ambassadors might be a coded passage meaningful only to one who knew the exact angle, in degrees, from which to consider it, like the oblique angle from which the skull becomes visible between the ambassadors. This hypothesis would allow one to read more into the text than appears at first glance. It then becomes a coded message, and we should have to shift our point of view, just as the spectator of Holbein's painting finally judges it according to criteria other than those that can be developed in a museum. This hypothesis kills me. It kills me because it obliges me to assume there is some sense in the passage written by this madwoman. When I left the office yesterday evening, these senseless pages formed no part of the text I was editing. This morning, I open my file and find it thicker by several pages, dictated by some short circuit in her brain to a stupid girl who claims to have authored a novel supposedly written in violent perspective. And the novel in question is none other than the very text I was preparing to publish as a sensational document on the life of Pierre X. Mignaud. And this young female is supposed to have been Joan's lover. What an indignity, and what a horror to think that some unknown chit has forced open my door and typed these pages in haste, with the sole purpose of throwing my mind into confusion. What's more, she has succeeded, for I no longer have the courage to reject the pages she has added to my file. I have reread them, and still can't believe my eyes. So that is RR's entrance to the text, and the original editor realizes that these pages have somehow mysteriously appeared in his briefcase, tucked in to the manuscript that he has been editing, and he has no idea how they got there. He can only suppose, but he is in such a state of confusion, he doesn't know what is and what isn't part of the text, that he leaves them in for the reader. Blackout is a French-Canadian masterpiece, and Alan Brown's translation is wonderful. The language of this book, it's been a long time since I read anything so beautifully intricate. Everything just seems to flow in such a perfect way, and I really wish that this book were still in print, because then I would put a link in the description and tell everyone to go out and buy themselves a copy of this and read it immediately. This is a new author for me. Hubert Aquin, never heard of him until Saturday when I bought this book at the book sale. I need to investigate him. I need to find out if there's any of his other works available in translation in English. French-Canadian literature. Get out and read some CanLit. Read some translated Canadian literature.